What's up, guys? Today I have the honor and the privilege to be joined by Chad Loomis, former NDSU radio host, and in my opinion, in North Dakota State University expert. He goes by Faithful Trey on Twitter, but he just knows everything about Trey Lance, NDSU. How are you doing?
Sorry about that. I'm great. I was getting some feedback there because I had your actual stream up and running
Okay.
on YouTube as well. So I was like trying to figure out the technicalities of it.
I was
I'm
like,
great, and I definitely know that I'm not worth that level of introduction, but I greatly appreciate it nonetheless.
No, man. I had you on before a couple of months ago, and it was phenomenal to have you on. You had a lot of great stuff to say, but let's jump right into it. Starting off without a further ado, let's talk about Trey Lance and his preseason performance.
Let's
The
do it.
Trey Lance had in my opinion, a great preseason performance. A lot of things to look at. Obviously, Trey Lance learned how to slide.
Yes,
Great.
that was
Obviously, that was
that's
great to
huge.
see. That was great to see. But overall, what was your overall evaluation on Trey Lance in his first preseason performance in his second year, and what were some of your takeaways?
Honestly, as far as the evaluation, I think that I mean, I know a lot of people are really excited about how he performed and thought that, like, oh, he broke out of this accuracy, whatever. No, that's honestly kind of what I was expecting him to do. I don't know that I would say I was expecting a perfect 158.3 QB rating, but beggars can't be choosers. He was a little bit high on his first out to Dwelly on the left-hand side by all means. And that's been a thing of his early in the game. I wish that they would do some sort of like pre-game that seemed like real game time speed or something so he could be up to speed. But it usually takes him a couple of passes to get rolling. But no, that was about exactly. The funny thing is like the play before the Danny Gray shot. I said, watch this. He's going to go deep to Danny Gray right here on 3rd and 9. And then lo and behold, and then I put on there. I was like, hey, called it. It was pure luck. But no, I was really excited about it. I think that everyone has been making way too big of a deal about his accuracy while he's practicing. At NDSU, he threw a bunch of picks in practice as well. It's kind of NDSU QB 101, and that is, who cares about throwing picks in practice? That's when you're learning how far you can push the envelope, as in, like, why would you not try and get it in at the very last second? So you got to figure out what's just beyond the last second to find out. So yeah, no, I was very happy. I think he's on pace for everything that I was predicting and projecting. As long as he stays healthy, he's going to have a fantastic season, I think. I've been saying since day one as well, I think there's a lot of people out there who expect him to do the stereotypical, have a lot of growing pains and a lot of big ups and big downs. That's typically not an NDSU quarterback thing. And that's why that whole year off of development is so fundamentally important. It's to avoid all of these small little pitfalls that happen during a rookie up and down quarterback season. So that's my answer.
Now, some of my takeaways from his first preseason game. Now, hopefully everybody in the chat can hear me well. Hopefully I'm not having any Wi-Fi issues. But some of my takeaways, now, obviously, you saw, I feel like Trey Lance was more poised in the pocket this preseason game compared to last preseason, because I was at game 1 last preseason, and obviously some of the similarities were that one deep pass last year was to Trent Sherfield, and then this year it was to Danny Gray, but he was definitely more poised in the pocket, I felt. His pocket presence was excellent. That one play where he escaped the pocket and he slid instead of, lowering his shoulder, trying to truck a defender, whatever it might be, he slid.
That scared the crap out of people in Fargo too, by the way. I don't want you to think that you're all alone on that. We were screaming for him to slide as well.
Obviously that he learned to slide, and hopefully he does that throughout the season, because unlike RG3 who got injured, who I talked about last stream, that running ability is a great ability to have with your quarterback, and that also is something that gives you a better chance of getting injured. So
yes.
if Trey Lance didn't learn how to slide and he continued to do what he did last year, the odds of him getting hurt again, or the odds of him getting hurt this upcoming season, would be higher than if he slid or ran out of bounds or wasn't as physical of a runner than he was last year. But that one deep pass was a beautiful deep pass. And overall, I'm excited to see how Trey Lance does this year. And even yesterday, he didn't have his best practice. And then today, he had a great practice, went 11 for 14, had a good practice. So, one thing that I'm seeing from Trey Lance is not even just in games, but in training camp and in preseason and in practice, is that Trey Lance, he'll have certain days where he struggles a little bit. Not to say that he has horrible days, but he misses some throws. It's not necessarily having a good day. And then a day later, he'll come back and he'll have a bounce back day. And he won't make those same mistakes that he did a day before, or training camp day 1 or training camp day 2. He tries to always get better, and he'll bounce back from what he was a day before. He always wants to get better, and you see that from yesterday. I think he went 4 for 14, and then today he goes 11 for 14 and bounces back and has a bounce back practice. And I don't know if you saw yesterday, while I was setting up for the stream, I was watching his interview. I was watching his interview with Peter King, and just the maturity level that you saw, just the maturity level that I saw from Trey Lance in that interview, of how he answered every question. I mean, I'm surprised that he's 22 years old, because the way he talks and the way that he engages with the media, he sounds like he's been in the league for almost 5 to 10 years. He sounds like a veteran.
Yep. He technically always has. In a sense, that's a lot of his father. His dad, Carlton, has instilled so much football knowledge, but it's not just like X's and O's. I mean, he was teaching his son how to become a man and at the same time a leader of a football team, and kind of equated to him like what that takes. In addition to that, it was Randy Hedberg, known as Coach Hedberg at NDSU, Matt Entz, the rest of the coaching staff, truth be told, and then Easton Stick. If you know, this is the time of the year that they always call it in, formerly San Diego, Los Angeles, for the Chargers. They call it Easton Stick season, because Easton always has this phenomenal training camp / preseason time, and everybody's like, oh, like he's so great, he should be ahead of Chase Daniels on the depth chart or whatever. He's never going to be the number one because he's competing with Herbert and he's backing up Herbert. So, but it has a lot to do with all of those people. But Trey is just personally, he's built different in regards to being a different human. When I tell people that he's everything that you want in a quarterback, he's an ambassador. And when they're trained at NDSU about being an ambassador, it includes we go help people when they need help. There was just a group of NDSU players 3 weeks ago that pulled a woman out of a burning car. Trey used to go and read and see kids that had cancer in hospitals. And I don't just mean a hospital, I mean all of them in Fargo. And they're very believing of giving of oneself. They're very Christian. They believe in altruism, just doing something out of the kindness of your heart with absolutely no reason, in regards to selfish reasoning of getting anything for yourself, even for the good feeling of it. You put that on other people. So that's how he leads, and that's the way that he is. That's why every day he's posting on social media. When he does, it's of his teammates. It's what they have going on in their lives. It's him being supportive of them. And it's not just the 49ers either. I mean, he's still keeping tabs on players at NDSU, and he's got his eye on what's happening in Fargo, I think, frequently as well. Now, granted, his brother is part of that, and you and I are going to talk about that in a little bit, but Trey has been built and educated thoroughly on all the nuances of football, and the game is so much more than what's played on the gridiron. So, yeah.
Well, speaking of, obviously, since this whole show is around Trey Lance, let's talk about some of the Trey Lance. Trey Lance obviously is the starter this season, but still a lot of people go back to last season and talk about, oh, he didn't start last season. And some of the most common things that people say, I have two quotes for you. Why wouldn't Kyle play him if he thought Trey gave them the best chance to win this last year?
Yep.
And another quote, which is the most common quote, is that he couldn't beat out Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yes.
And that's the biggest thing that the first quote I've heard before, but the second quote is the main quote that a lot of people talk about. And they say, if he beat out Jimmy Garoppolo and if he was downright better than Jimmy Garoppolo, he would have started last season.
Yes.
There would have been no questions about it. But since he wasn't better than Jimmy Garoppolo, the Niners did not start him last season, and they thought Jimmy Garoppolo was the better option. So what would you say to that? Because I've heard that a lot, and I know obviously you know a lot about Trey Lance. So what would you say to the people that say that? Not even the people that say that, but the national media on ESPN or whatever it might be that say that about Trey Lance last season were saying that, oh, he didn't start because he couldn't beat out Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah, I will tell them the exact same thing that I have said since day one from the very beginning, and I have not backed down from anyone that has a blue check mark or otherwise. And that is, this was determined before last season. And I know that that's really hard for some people to wrap their heads around, and they're so like anti-Trey or pro-Jimmy or whatever, what have you. But the fact is that there was a meeting that happened during the pro day number 2 for the San Francisco 49ers that happened in the facilities. Matt Entz was there, a couple of other NDSU athletic department people, a couple of other coaches. I know that Coach Randy Hedberg dropped in for a very brief period of time. And during this conversation, there was a lot that was talked about, but one specifically, and the theme from the NDSU side, especially from Randy Hedberg, was this kid needs a year to develop. Now, you have to understand the great landscape that is NDSU football and kind of some of the deep-rooted beliefs and fundamental core foundational like ideologies of NDSU. When they say it's NDSU culture, it's not like when other colleges are like the Ohio State University. Like, it's a much different player development experience. From most other like large developed FBS programs in the top 10, you're going to get your 4 and 5 star type of recruits, right? And they're going to perform at 4 and 5 star recruit level. At NDSU, if we're lucky, we'll get a 2-star recruit. Trey Lance, I think, was the first 3 that we'd ever had. Carson Wentz was a half star. He barely even made like the metrics for it. But Jim Kramer is our development coach's name, and he is second to none on the planet for developing players. That's why NDSU in 2019 had 12 different NFL players. Like, that team alone at a subdivision in the FCS had 12 NFL players on it, on one roster. That's not only unheard of, that's ridiculous. That's why NDSU needs to be looked at as a top 10 overall college football team and not just a subdivision top level. The problem is NDSU can't get an invite to the FBS. That's the way that this works. It's not a matter of like they need to move up, they should have moved up. Yeah, well, you got to get an invitation. That's the way that it works. And of the top 5 football teams in the FCS, I think 3 of them got an invite to go up. But the team that won 9 of the last 11 titles has never even sniffed an invitation, let alone we can't get a game and haven't been able to in 6 years against the FBS. 99.5% of every other team in the entire subdivision and all of FCS gets an annual FBS game. The only team that hasn't gotten one like at least every other year is NDSU, and it's because they kick the crap out of the FBS team and they take their money at home in front of their fans, in front of their home crowd, and that's supposed to be a cupcake game. They're purchasing a win is technically what FBS teams are doing. That's why nobody will play NDSU. Now, am I like ridiculously biased? Yeah and no. Like, I'm definitely biased, but I'm a realist as well. They're right there in the top 10. I would never put them in a top 5, but I know that I would definitely troll anyone that is in a decision-making situation from Alabama to try and pull that game, because the fact of the matter is that we call every top FBS team, and not only do we not get the game, we don't get a return phone call. That's directly from our AD from NDSU. I mean, he told me straight directly. So the conversation, this, kind of extends to answering your question in a long form situation, but it has to do with a meeting that was had, and our quarterback coach, Randy Hedberg, still to this day believe he's the best quarterback coach on the planet. He's the one responsible for Easton Stick, Carson Wentz, now Trey Lance, the next couple of guys that are coming out that'll also be in the NFL. But he was originally a 1977 Buccaneers quarterback. The problem is that he was never like trained. He wasn't ready for it. There was nobody to tell him what he was getting into. So his entire rookie year, he was running for his life. And he was terrible. He was horrible, admittedly. But he said that's because he was unprepared. So he, along with the rest of the NDSU staff a number of years ago, instilled this program at NDSU. It's a culture of the players themselves basically getting a piece of the franchise, of the team, of the entity. And what I mean by that is when you sign a contract with NDSU as being committed to their program, you are committing to sitting your first year. You're committing to developing, to learning. So this whole he wasn't able to beat out Jimmy G. There was never a competition. You need to all hear me very clearly, okay? This was decided before last season. Shanahan and Lynch sat down Jimmy G and they said, hey, here's the situation. We love you. You're awesome, but you're injured too frequently, and we can't rest the entire franchise on your ability to stay healthy or not. So we're going to look to the future, and we're going to give you an opportunity that you never got with Tom Brady in that quarterback room and in that situation. We're going to let you mentor the next kid to come in. In addition to that, we're giving you a chance to audition for your next opportunity, which he did. He took full advantage of, I believe. I know how you guys feel about Jimmy G. I feel the exact same way about Kirk Cousins, but it was never a competition. If it was a competition, if you want to go by the numbers of what happened last year in spring camp, Trey was more accurate. He was better than Jimmy. In our opinion, Trey has been considerably better than Jimmy all along. It's just a matter of the national media committed to a completely incorrect, false. It was a lie. It was a lie narrative that everyone in national media was subscribing to. And from the top of my lungs, i.e. doing streams like this with you, I was telling every one of them that they had it wrong, that NDSU quarterbacks sit year one. Now, you can say Carson Wentz didn't, but he was supposed to. Randy Hedberg was told by Doug Peterson and the Philadelphia brass that Carson Wentz would be sitting year one as well. What they didn't realize is that Carson was already so well trained and versed in football and in X's and O's that they were like, oh, this kid's already ready. We're going to get rid of Sam Bradford. So the thing when I say that we develop quarterbacks differently, when they come in year one, they are taught how to read X's and O's. Then once they're taught that, they are taught to come up with a game plan and a strategy in combination with their coaching staff. And then they're the ones that lead all the meetings. They lead the meetings not only for the quarterbacks, but for the team and for all other sub groupings as well. Like defensive linemen to this day will be like, no, Trey would call me on Sunday morning and make sure that are we ready for our 9 a.m. practice or whatever. He is on top of everything because he was trained that way by Easton Stick, who was trained by Carson Wentz. Everybody is given the same level of responsibility at NDSU. It's not a player that's getting fed a script from the sideline. Trey goes into the huddle and he knows the entire playbook at all times. He knew the entire San Francisco 49ers playbook 2 weeks into camp. That's a fact. Everybody was saying he spent so much time on the iPad, and Kyle joked about it saying, well, I know that you can leave an iPad open and it'll still read it like you're using it or whatever. All of us in North Dakota were laughing because we knew otherwise. We knew that was actually Trey training because he's a film nerd. He's a geek. He's the first to admit it. He loves listening to rap, to Christian, to audiobooks, to watching game film. And he's also different in preparation from other quarterbacks that he's going to take all of his game film with him home the night of the game. And then he's going to study the crap out of it. And then by Monday morning, when all the coaching staff's like, hey, let's look through this, he's already going to be ready. He's going to know the talking points. He's going to know what to talk about. And he's going to be thinking three-dimensionally on behalf of all the different teams. He's going to be thinking in regards to the defense, the offense, the special teams, and then the subdivisions of those as well. There is very little that escapes this young man. And that was a lot to do with his father, but then also landing in the absolute perfect place to be trained in how to be an overall all-encompassing quarterback. That's why I'm such an advocate for this kid. Sink or swim, that's fine. but from a human being and a leadership standpoint, there's really second to none. I've yet to see it on a gridiron. So in regards to your uncle or any other family member or their dog or anyone that will listen, I don't care who it is, this decision was made before the year last year. It can simply be broken down to Jimmy was 21, Trey 22. That's why at no point in time has Jimmy G had a playbook. That's why at no point has he participated in practice. It's not up for debate. It's not like, oh, Trey's doing terribly in practice and like that's why they're keeping Jimmy on the. No, they're not. It had everything to do with him being injured, and then also there being a considerable number of better talented quarterbacks that were available during that crazy, trade war that happened over a 2-3 week period of time with quarterbacks. So now he's just like on the sidelines, and now he's back in San Francisco and not traveling with the team to Minnesota. He's trying to stay out there and be relevant and have film that like he's ready to go. So if somebody has an issue, like let's say Deshaun Watson gets, put on ice for the entire year, who's to say that might be an opportunity? Who's to say that Daniel Jones doesn't continue to struggle out in New York and he might have a chance there? I think that they're trying to do everything that they can to get anything out of him, whether that's like a 5th or 6th rounder. I think a lot of the faithful are kind of out of their range, thinking that they're going to get a 2nd and 3rd. And that I'm not an expert on anything San Francisco 49ers by any means, especially Jimmy Garoppolo, but that's my unbiased like Minnesota Vikings fan opinion on Jimmy Garoppolo. I mean, as a Vikings fan, none of us ever like really feared Jimmy. Feared your defense and your run game 100%. Feared Deebo Samuel last year, definitely. This year, though, it's going to be out of hand. One thing that I wanted to equate to your audience tonight was that Trey spreads the ball out better than anyone. And that's, again, an NDSU thing. Carson Wentz, if you look back to like 2 years ago, the last year that he was with Philly, or maybe the second to last year, but he's the first quarterback that threw for over 4,000 yards without having a single target with more than 500 yards. So like, they realize in game planning forward, like they're always thinking a couple of steps ahead. They realize that in 4 to 5 games, most quarterbacks have enough tendencies on film that the defense is going to be able to figure them out, right? But what happens when you're spreading the ball all over the place to everybody and you can't get down tendencies? And now you offer in like third options that I'm seeing today that they're mixing up with like Deebo Samuel in the backfield with like a triple option threat. Like he's going to be having a heyday. I'm just saying that Kyle's going to be operating back there and it's going to be absolutely ridiculous. I think Trey is going to have a phenomenal year this year. So hopefully that answers your question. It was never Jimmy versus Trey. It was Jimmy, then Trey.
Yep, that was a long, in-depth answer, so I appreciate that. I want to say what's up to the chat real quick. We have Stunna. What's up, Stunna? Brian, obviously, who's a regular who always tunes into the channel and also is a moderator. So appreciate you for being a moderator and always tuning in. Swan Song, he's every show that you've been on, whether that might be Niner Nate's channel, who's also in here. He's been in here.
Swan Song was messing with me. I love him back. I did want to say to Brian, absolutely, yes, he broke his finger. That's also why he was having a wobble. That's also why he was having accuracy issues, especially regarding the Arizona game. That goes without saying. I mean, look at how he threw. Look at how the ball came off of his hand. And yet he was still like decently accurate.
There was some good throws still. There was some good throws that he made to try IU.
He was okay, but I'll just say that I think quite a bit of that accuracy came from that issue. That's why Trey is so much now like, hey, like, no. Like, I'm 100% good. My throw is back to normal. We're all good. But he did have an injury. There was rumor, I know, when they were 3-5 about bringing Trey in and letting him go from that point forward. And I don't know by any means all the gray area-ness of that, but I do know fundamentally that they wanted to sit Trey year one. So,
yep, and obviously Niner Nate's also in here. He said, "Faithful Trey, the goat on Trey knowledge." You really know yourself. That's why in the video, I think in the description, I put NDSU expert because you know so much about NDSU, and we talked about it backstage. But that answer that you just gave just shows how much you know just about Trey Lance and NDSU's football program.
That just had to do with the contact that I have through being in radio in Fargo that I still have there at NDSU that told me the story of the meeting. Now, I knew of one meeting, but Jesse Naylor actually spoke with the NDSU quarterback coach, Randy Hedberg, that I'm referencing right now. And I didn't know about a secondary conversation that had happened. This is kind of a quick, funny story, but it was like, I think a Saturday night, and they were out with like family and friends in downtown Fargo in a loud like area. And he got a call and he didn't hear it when he got it. And so he went outside and he called the number back, and he thought it was like his son-in-law or something like that playing a prank or something. So he jumps on the phone and he's like, sorry, I wasn't available. And he just kind of had a lighthearted tone. And on the other end, it was like, hey, this is Kyle Shanahan. and Randy's like, he said he felt pretty darn embarrassed. And then he's like, hey, can I call you back? It's really loud here. And so he called him back the following day. And they had a 20-minute conversation. And I'll guarantee you the theme of that conversation, 95% of it was, sit this kid and he'll be elite next year. And so that's the gist.
Yep. I want to say what's up to Mariah real quick. She's also another Niner content creator, so go check out her channel if you haven't already. And then David McNew also, who's just another regular and also is a moderator. Appreciate David and Bryant's support and everybody's support right now in the chat. But let's talk about your expectations for Trey Lance this upcoming season, because I'll talk about it after. And
I want to hear yours first, and then I'm more than happy to. I want to hear you first though, because I've been talking nonstop. So you tell me.
All right, so here's my only expectations realistically for Trey Lance. I want to see that improvement from week 1 to week 17. Whether that might be, accuracy, getting better accuracy, completion percentage, whatever it might be. I just want to see that improvement from the week 1 to week 17. Now, obviously, we want him to stay healthy. That's a big thing, especially with 49ers quarterbacks, and that's the reason why Jimmy's gone, because Jimmy Garoppolo just couldn't stay healthy. But just that improvement for me, at least personally, next year probably will be for me, okay, is Trey Lance the real deal? But this season, all really my expectations, or at least what I would say defines success, at least in my opinion, for Trey Lance, is just to see how well he does from week 1 and to week 17, and how much he improves from week 1 to week 17. Now, I think this offense is just going to completely change because Trey Lance adds that deep ball that Jimmy Garoppolo couldn't give you. So I think that's obviously one thing. And then also in the run game, I said this last year, and that was my biggest case for why the 49ers should have started him last year, is because what the 49ers offense is a heavy run game and a limited quarterback throws, a limited amount of passes. And having Trey Lance under center compared to having Jimmy G under center is that Trey Lance can also use his legs. So he's also a threat. So, and I remember in 2019 when we played Baltimore, that's what they did. They utilized Lamar Jackson's threat in his legs, and they run a lot of RPOs where it'd be, okay, this time we give it to Mark Ingram. This time we give it to Lamar Jackson. Where you could have done that with Trey Lance last season, where you could say, okay, we'll give it to Elijah Mitchell a couple of times. We'll give it to Trey Sermon a couple of times. And we could also run it with Trey Lance, and you don't know who we're going to give the ball to. And both of those guys are threats. Elijah Mitchell's a threat, and so is Trey Lance a threat. So I said, why not start Trey Lance? Because unlike Jimmy Garoppolo in the run game, Trey Lance adds another dimension, which is he can also run and he can also use his legs, and he's also mobile. So that was my biggest case for starting him. But realistically, my expectations just for Trey Lance. Now, hopefully the Niners do make the playoffs, but I can't say that because of injuries. And if you, obviously, I know you've been watching the Niners the last 2 seasons, I think. But one thing about the Niners, they get injuries. And already Jimmy Ward, who's our starting safety, he got hurt. It's a severe hamstring strain. He might miss week 1, but the Niners always, almost, I feel like every season, they have at least one big injury, and then they have a bunch of other injuries. And in 2020, I mean, Nick Bosa got hurt, and our whole defense almost got hurt. Our whole team almost got hurt. But that's the one thing with this Niners team, is they just can't stay healthy. But like I said, the expectations for me personally is just to see him get better. And then next season, we'll talk about, okay, is Trey Lance the guy? Is Trey Lance the real deal? Then my expectations are just to see how well Trey Lance performs and to see that improvement from week 1 to week 17.
Yep. Well, I wish that most 49er fans were as level-headed as you are, truth be told, and that was their only expectations. I know that there are some people out there that are saying that Trey's got to be, you guys are in a win now mode, and Trey's got to be better than Jimmy. And in order for him to be better than Jimmy, he's got to at least make it to the NFC Championship.
Yeah, but I mean, for the national media, right? Like I said this before, for the national media, if Trey Lance, let's talk about it. Like from this season, if let's say the season starts tomorrow, if we go play the Rams and Trey Lance doesn't beat the Rams, oh, Jimmy Garoppolo beats the Rams twice a year. Jimmy Garoppolo 6-0 against the Rams. Trey Lance can't beat the Rams. Is Trey Lance the guy? Question mark, question mark, question mark. If Trey Lance was it a mistake moving off Jimmy Garoppolo? Let's say the Niners don't make the playoffs this year. Jimmy Garoppolo wins football games. Jimmy
You mean
Garoppolo's
the playoffs? Did you mean the
Trey-offs.
playoffs?
That's good. That's good. I like that. I like that. Yeah, but okay, let's
can't
say
have the playoffs without Trey. That's what I tell everyone.
yeah, but let's say hypothetically they don't, right? Jimmy Garoppolo wins. He's a winner. He's a proven winner. When he's healthy, the Niners always make the playoffs.
I've heard every argument that your side has, and I've heard every argument against it in regards to like Jimmy G just rides coattails of the defense and hands the ball off. He's a horrible fourth quarter playoff quarterback. Some people blame Kyle Shanahan and his playmaking calling in the fourth quarter. I mean, there's a wide array of excuses one way or another. And you know what? I think it's inevitable, and it's also like undebatable that there's going to be the Jimmy stands out there that are going to continuously like love him and miss him. And I get that. And you know how to solve that? It's the same thing every time, winning. It's just the people say like, he's 34-15 or whatever his record was. And I keep saying, well, Trey is 21-1 in his last 22. Well, that breaks down to them saying, well, like, oh yeah, well, who's that playing? And then it breaks down the exact same way that you just said it, half hour ago, where you're saying like, who was NDSU playing? Well, there's a reason for that. It's because nobody will play them. And so the only apples to apples that exist, and I don't know if you knew this or not, I've posted this a couple of times on my Twitter, but the only apples to apples comparison of Trey Lance and Jimmy Garoppolo are season 2 of their college career, right? Because you can't be comparing an 8th year NFL experienced quarterback with Trey Lance. It's just, that's absolutely ridiculous, even though Trey is still better than Jimmy. However, there's like a lot of experiential stuff that he's got to go through in order to get the smallest minutia ins and outs of it that Jimmy has already had the highs and lows and has over a 8-year duration been able to, cultivate and get through. So in regards to that, I always tell people the same thing. I'm going to see if I can remember the stats off the top of my head here, but I think it was 14 touchdowns and 13 turnovers or interceptions in his sophomore season. Keep in mind that Jimmy Garoppolo did go on to win the Walter Payton Award, which is the FCS version of the Heisman Trophy. If you didn't know this, and I'm just notifying you of this right now, Jimmy Garoppolo played in the FCS, which is the same division that NDSU plays in. He played for Eastern Illinois. His sophomore season, he finished with 14 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. In Trey's sophomore season, he finished with 42 touchdowns and 0 interceptions. So, I mean, that's the only real fair comparison. The only other one that I can make for you is what Eastern Illinois is to the FCS and what NDSU is to the FCS. It's a lot like comparing like a run-of-the-mill G5 school to Bama, honestly. I mean, in contrast. And here's the perfect example. In 2015, when Jimmy Garoppolo won the Walter Payton Award, the reason why he actually made it from college to the pros was that season. He ended up making it and taking his team all the way to the quarterfinals of the FCS playoffs, where he lost to a team called Towson. That's the school, Towson, by 10 points. I think it was like 49-39 or 39-29 or something like that. Well, 2 weeks later, NDSU played them in the championship and beat them by 35. So at no point in time have they been on
is the
equal path.
Alabama of the FCS.
And it's so hard to explain that to San Francisco fans and not sound like condescending or conceited or boastful. And it's not by any means. It's just like it's like you guys comparing the rest of the FCS and the FBS, right? It's like everybody says every year that like 5% of NFL draftees are from the FCS, and they put that statistic on all of the FCS. When in all actuality, it's like all of the players from the FCS of that 5% come from NDSU, spare for maybe 2 every season. So you have to understand that's like saying like Oklahoma doesn't have any good players, right? And there's a long branching explanation why you can explain why I honestly believe NDSU is better than Oklahoma. People are going to hate me for that. Go Sooners, doesn't matter to me. I just know that NDSU and their philosophy have been proven to be able to beat Oklahoma through Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. Chris Kleiman at Kansas State will be the first guy to tell you that he would want nothing to do with NDSU. And that's because they beat them a while back, and he knows everything that they throw at him, and NDSU would still probably beat him, and he knows that, and he's proud of it because he's a part of that heritage. So hopefully that explains like more in depth.
Yeah, that definitely does. And I mean, you mentioned it. You mentioned it about Jimmy Garoppolo, about him being almost an 8-year. I think he is an 8-year vet, like you mentioned. But we obviously know he's a veteran. And you
Yes.
compare it to Trey Lance. Trey Lance is only his second year, and that's
Yep.
what people were talking about in training camp. On days that Trey would struggle, they're like, "Oh, how come you don't grade Trey Lance the same way that you guys grade Jimmy Garoppolo, or have the same criticism that you have for Jimmy Garoppolo?" Is because Jimmy Garoppolo has been in the league for 8 years, and
Yeah.
Trey
Yes.
Lance has only been in the league for 2.
And I get people's frustration, but they have to realize that they're technically not frustrated with Trey. They're frustrated with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch for making the decision when you have an entirely, admittedly loaded roster and then dropping it in the hands of this kid from no-name small school that nobody knows. The problem is that some people understand the landscape of all of college football, and they know the Cooper Kupps before they become the Cooper Kupps and household names. So they always take offense to like when we know anything about like a subdivision player, like James Robinson from Jacksonville. He got crapped on by the coach from Ohio State, Urban Meyer. Right? Yeah. He got crapped on by Urban. He's a phenomenal running back. They need to get that kid the rock nonstop. Just like Cooper Kupp, the first in 17 years, I think it was, the first ever Triple Crown winner in 17 years. That's WR1. I don't care what you say about Devontae Adams or Hopkins or anything. No, the guy who's making all the catches, the guy who's getting all the touchdowns, and the guy who comes through in the clutch and wins you the Super Bowl. Yeah, that's the best wide receiver in the NFL. He comes from the subdivision. He comes from a top 5 FBS program, but not number 1, which then leads me to believe, and that's why I also tell people Christian Watson's going to be a top wideout as well. I don't know necessarily that it's going to be this year because he hasn't had like the year of fundamental and training and stuff, and he also was hurt a little bit during our OTAs. But anyway, that's me going off on the tangent again.
Yeah, I wanted to answer some of the questions in the comment. He says, "Here's my question: if something happens to Trey Lance before week 1, what do they do with Jimmy? If Jimmy's still on the roster and Trey Lance gets hurt,
I'm saying play him absolutely 100%. Yeah,
if Trey
definitely.
Lance gets hurt, if Trey Lance gets hurt and he's out for the whole entire season, right? And obviously, we don't wish that on Trey Lance.
If it's season ending, yeah. Otherwise, I would roll with Sudfeld. Otherwise, I would roll with Sudfeld. Sure, throw in Purdy every once in a while. I think Sudfeld's a decent quarterback. I just know that he's not versatile and he's not mobile, but he seems pretty accurate. I mean, I could be wrong. I come from a long line of crappy quarterbacks and knowing them. So from a Minnesota standpoint, and I said this earlier today and I said it too quickly on Twitter, but I think Kevin O'Connell, what I want to come away with for the week of practice with the Minnesota Vikings, I want O'Connell to come away and be like, thank God, I thought I was going to not have to play that kid against the Rams. And now I feel like we just missed out on a golden opportunity at like a generational quarterback. So
I don't know if you knew this or not, and I don't know if you necessarily want to hear this or not.
Yep.
I saw this on social media the other day. that the Vikings last year would have been 15-2 if
Oh, I know the stat.
the
Yeah.
last 2 minutes of the game, they would have been 15-2 if they
We
did not
lost
score
a
the field.
record 9 games in the last like 30
Time
seconds of the game.
management. Time management. Mike Zimmer just wasn't good at it at all. And I don't know why they kept Mike Zimmer for as long as they kept Mike Zimmer, but
You
he
see
just
my eyes closed right now.
wasn't.
I'm just shaking my head. I know. I know.
Yeah.
It's the plight of being a Vikings fan, and what's perfect for me to be the messenger of I'm not the messenger of Trey Lance, but of NDSU, is that you can complain to me all you want about, oh, but we're in win. I don't want to hear it. I don't care. I don't pity you. I have no, like, you're not going to give me any of your guilt. It's not going to happen because I come from the worst of the worst. And if anybody knows needing a generational quarterback, which you now have, it's me and my franchise. Not to mention, we continually pass over fantastic players from the state of Minnesota as a Viking. So it's like the most ironic and ridiculous thing that exists. But yeah,
Yep.
I,
Swans.
dig- I digress. But I think to answer that question, Jimmy Garoppolo, if he's still on, I want him off because it's going to be toxic. I mean, it hasn't been so far. They've separated completely church and state. I've given him major props from that. I think that the coaching staff and the organization realizes that there's a toxic entity that could happen, but they've been really good at negotiating the entire relationship between Jimmy G and Trey to this point in time. So there's nothing that leads me to believe that they're not going to do what's best for both of them in the long run. I know that they're trying. There's 3 parties to this. So in some sense, there's always going to be a 3-way love triangle that you're just going to have to deal with in the fallout. But they're either going to trade or drop Jimmy G. But if something freakish were to happen in preseason and Jimmy G still on the roster and Trey's out for the season, absolutely bring that dude back in. Like I said, they got along great. I have nothing against Jimmy G. He was a phenomenal mentor for Trey. They always put on me, because I'm like one of Trey's biggest fans and a proponent of his, they always put on me that I hate Jimmy G. Nothing could be further from the truth. Why would I not want an FCS Walter Payton award-winning quarterback who got crapped on in his last gig as a backup quarterback? Why would I not want that guy as the one that gets to train and mentor Trey into his first season? He was the perfect guy for it. But now I definitely am on the train of like, you need to hop a ticket on the next flight out to whatever team needs you.
Yep. Swan says can't assume you win all those games. I mean, you necessarily can't assume that you win all those games, but
Of what games? Sorry.
you have a high chance of winning those games if you could just win. If you could just hold your
Oh,
last
the
2 games.
15-2 you're talking about?
Yeah, the team that's
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's very much true. But I mean, just going with the flip a coin probability, that's not Minnesota Viking fandom. Skull Nation is known for one thing, and that is setting you up to give you hope when you didn't think you were possible. You didn't think that hope was a possibility, and then somehow they reel you in every single year, like they've done for me this season. Like this season, I think that we're going to have a phenomenal team, right? We trick ourselves into believing every year. Like I wish that we would listen to more national pundits telling us that we don't stand a chance, because we're excited about this season. I am personally. I don't like our quarterback, but I think the rest of our quarterback is good. He's a
You
little
like
bit
that?
different
You like that?
in what?
Kirk Cousins
Oh
being
yeah,
good. You
yes,
like
yes.
that?
And Kirk, yes. So the thing with Kirk is, and the why he said that to begin with, is he's always been known as the guy that can't come through in the clutch, right? Like Jimmy is not necessarily that guy. Like he's been able to come through in the clutch, but it's been more so like he's been able to like do the right things at the right times, but he's not necessarily the reasoning ever behind their wins, if that's fair to say. Kirk Cousins,
Yeah.
he did nothing wrong. He was phenomenal last season. Our defense was terrible. But at the same time, he's also not the guy that can go out there in the last 2 minutes and rip it and win you the game. That's the guy you want. You want the gunslinger and the guy who says, give me the ball. I will do whatever it takes to go out there and win. That's Trey. So,
Yep. And Swan asked a question: how many NDSU jerseys will be in practice on Wednesday?
I hope a ton. I've got family that's going to be there. I've got a couple of friends that are going to be there. I don't know if they can get any multimedia or not. I don't know what the legalities are regarding like filming and whatever, but yep, I know that a number are going to be there. I'm really disappointed that he's not going to be playing. I wish of all the games that he got to play in the preseason that was one of them. I mean, I think that goes without saying for the entire state of North Dakota and like Marshall, Minnesota. For Fargo, I know there are going to be a lot of people there. I know a lot of people in the Twin Cities that are going to be there for the practices and for the game itself. So I'm excited. I hope that I don't care about preseason, so I hope that Trey balls out personally.
I agree with Swan on this. I think the Browns won't bite and just wait until Jimmy gets cut. I agree.
I think that's smart from the rest of the league.
Why
I
trade
agree.
for someone when you can get him for a
Right?
cheaper deal?
The only
For a cheaper deal.
I do know that like it seemed like San Francisco's PR department, and by that I mean like the word that they were trying to leak out there was they were trying to make it seem like there were a couple of teams that were potentially interested. That would be the only reason to be playing this game. But you're right, we're getting too late into the entire situation for that to be a realistic scenario. So yeah, they're going to probably just have to cut him.
Yep. Let's talk about Trey Lance, wide receiver, who's currently in Green Bay. So, not specifically about. Obviously, we know Christian Watson is injured. I think he's injured right now, but he started.
He's back now. He's not injured
He's back,
anymore. He just came off the
back.
PUP list.
I saw a video of him catching passes from Aaron Rodgers, but I would just like to. What was your reaction? Round 2, the Packers go out and draft Christian Watson, pick 34. I know you were really. I remember pre-draft sitting down with you and talking about Christian Watson. But how was that whole night for you? I mean,
It's
you're not going to
heartbreaking.
see him twice a year.
I was texting with his brother. Not with his. Yeah, I was texting with his brother and his aunt and his uncle. His dad was like really busy that day. About the entire situation. And I said, oh God, I hope that Green Bay is not going to trade up for him in the second round. And not only is that what happened, but it was the fact that they traded with the Minnesota Vikings for that pick. That's what broke my heart the most and almost guarantees that Christian Watson is going to go off against the Minnesota Vikings. And the worst part is we play them week 1. So I hope that there's a little bit of lag in his development being hurt and that he had to have a small surgery, but he's already back. I hope that he's not going to be 100% when we have to play against him, but it fears the ever-loving bejesus out of me that he's going to set fire with 23 miles an hour straight away and just go deep on us right off the bat.
I mean, I don't really follow college football that much, so I don't really have that with the Niners where I'm like, oh, I really like this player, and now they're going up against my team. But I mean, that must have been really. It would hard
be like if your favorite college player played on the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I get it. Right. But I mean,
like, where did DK come from? I don't remember off the top of my head.
Mississippi.
Yes, thank you, Mississippi. Yeah, it'd be like if your favorite college was Mississippi and DK Metcalf was one of your favorite players of all time.
I wanted DK Metcalf, so it was okay. That's the question. I wanted DK Metcalf. I had a board. Nick Bosa, DK Metcalf. Those are my top 2.
I wanted Christian Watson first and foremost for the Vikings, and then I wanted him to be with Trey. And I knew that the Vikings weren't going to go after him because they didn't need. I mean, they've got Justin Jefferson. That'd be ridiculous. It's not an essential need that they needed.
Jefferson is a great wide receiver.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. And not to mention, Adam Thielen's still really good in and of himself as well. Yes, he loves doing the gritty. But so it broke my heart, absolutely. But I wish nothing but the best for him. But after the season starts, I wish him to die. And I don't mean that. I just, it's the rivalry. Like, you got to have your allegiances. You got to have your loyalties, right? And his family knows that I love him to death, and I was doing everything that I could to promote him, back during the draft period. So,
this is not one of the topics that we have, but I've always wondered because North Dakota doesn't have a football team, like an actual NFL team. I wouldn't say football team.
Oh, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, they don't have an NFL team. So
correct.
What what like in North Dakota,
What do we have?
yeah, who do teams like who is your NFL
Okay.
team? I know your NFL team is the Vikings, but who
Here's
is
here's
like the
the
majority?
here's typically the fandom breakdown. Out in the western part of the state, there's a good chance that they could be like Broncos fans, to Minnesota Vikings fans. There's some Cowboys, there's some Packers throughout. But for the most part, in the eastern part of the state where I'm from, we're diehard Minnesota fans. And that's like Minnesota Wild, Minnesota Timberwolves, Twins, Vikings, you name it. But the teams that we have a national awesome collegiate team, UND, the University of North Dakota. They also have a football team. They're also now all the way up to a top 10 team again in the FCS. And that's a long storied rivalry between NDSU and UND. It's a 3-hour car drive or like 2-hour car drive if you're flying from Fargo to Grand Forks or, the other way around. But for the most part, if you're out of the state now, like I am in Atlanta, you typically, it's okay now for me to cheer for the University of North Dakota, formerly the Fighting Sioux. Now they're the Falcons or the Hawks. Sorry. It's tough for me to remember. But that's the hockey team is UND, and then NDSU typically is football. But that's like who we typically root for. If you have an odd person, like with an odd allegiance, it's usually a Chicago team, and then it has to do with growing up in the 80s, and WGN was free for everybody to watch. So you were like a Bulls fan. Like that's why Michael Jordan, I mean, granted, he was a phenomenal, universal, all-time great, but the fact is that he was featured on WGN, who had a national contract, so everybody in the United States could watch Michael for free on a nightly basis, and that's kind of what made it such a huge deal. That's why there are a lot of random Cubs fans out there as well.
That's nice. I mean, now you have to pay for games that aren't locally in your region.
Yeah.
If you could watch Michael Jordan for free,
yeah, I'm gonna have to pay.
Nice. That's a privilege. That's a
privilege
I have to every
pay.
night.
I gotta pay to watch Trey this year. That stinks. But yeah.
Yep. And I want to give a shout out to Always Faithful. I went on his show last Wednesday. Another amazing 49er content creator. Go subscribe to their channel if you haven't already. Go show them some love as well. Amazing work that they do there. Another thing before we talk more about NDSU and we move a little bit off of Trey Lance, accuracy issues. And that's some things that some buzz that you heard around training camp. And then you also heard it pre-draft, and that was what a lot of people had concerned about Trey Lance or con about Trey Lance is that he has accuracy issues.
Yes.
So did you see that in college? Did you see that he had was it obvious that he had some accuracy issues?
What I will say is that the accuracy issues last year had to do with his finger. True, like I'm almost positive of it. For this year and this season in practice, not worried in the least. It's practice. You're learning how to get your craft down. A lot of people put way too much. That's an NDSU practice thing too. Like he threw a lot of picks at NDSU in the 2019 campaign that he threw 0 during the season. So you need to like squash that belief that he's going to have a lot of like accuracy as far as interceptions issues. Accuracy overall, it's going to be reps. It's like he's going to need the reps. As he gains more reps, he gains more accuracy. I talked to Jesse about this on his stream the other night. I think that he's probably right. 62 to 63%, I think will probably be his accuracy this season. We'll come back at the end of the year and see if I'm right or wrong, but that's my opinion on it and not really something to worry about. Other people that are looking for clickbait and stuff, like the national media, they like to talk about his accuracy. I don't really think he has accuracy issues. So,
yep. I mean,
you saw how he was. You saw how he was in his preseason game, right?
Yeah, I mean that deep ball and all his passes were just on point.
Yeah, let's talk about this just like in the grand scheme of things, okay? When the lights are on, when the camera's rolling, when it's a win or loss scenario, you don't need to worry about him. He takes every rep with the same calm, cool, collected mentality every single time. He doesn't put too much pressure on himself. If he throws a bad throw, the next time that he comes back, he's just as likely to complete it as any other time. Like he doesn't get down into the doldrums and hit like a low spot where he just keeps being inaccurate. No, he's going to come back and he's going to sling it in a different spot that you didn't see coming next time. So he's got that dog in him. He's never not. It's just a matter of like, for clicks and for interaction online, they've got to talk about something. So yeah, let's make way too big of a deal and overemphasize practice accuracy and OTA accuracy. OTAs, sure, because you want to get into the scheme and the rhythm with everybody again. Practice, again, I could care less. It literally means nothing. Now, going into a game like he is, or going into a practice where he's playing against like the Vikings, like today he went 11 for 14, right? That doesn't surprise me. I would expect for him to be like, okay, now that I've done my like highs and lows, figuring out how fast on certain, passes and touches and this and that, like I need to get it dialed in now. I need to have a good practice and be accurate. At the same time, there's a lot to be said for the 3 out of 4 DBs in your secondary that are currently out for injury purposes. I mean, that says a lot. I think Grant Cohen talked about it today, but yeah, definitely.
Yep. I mean, I've said this before about training camp, is that the difference between Jimmy G and Trey Lance, specifically in practice or in training camp, is that Trey Lance is not afraid to take risks. He's not afraid to take risks in practice, right? And a lot of people are talking about completion
He
percentage.
is afraid to take risks in the game. That's the thing that I'm hoping he gets over. That's what I hope he gets over. I don't understand why people have an issue with a conservative quarterback who is known for not taking, like, that needs to take more risks, that has the ability to take more risks. And then he does in practice, and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh my God, accuracy issues or interceptions or whatever. And it's like, well, how do you expect this kid to get more hungry, more aggressive if you're not giving him is he supposed to be on some super secret like practice field somewhere that you're not judging him? That's what I'm wondering. So
yep. And I
didn't mean to cut you off. Anyway, go ahead.
And I said this before, right? The difference between Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance is that Jimmy Garoppolo plays a more conservative style of football in practice.
Yeah.
Right? And Jimmy Garoppolo, if the pocket is collapsing, he's throwing into his check down, or he's dink pass, or like he's not gonna try to go if he sees Brandon Ayuk 20 yards down the field. He's not gonna go take that shot. He's gonna try to play a safe, conservative style of football. Whereas Trey Lance in practice, if he sees Ayuk, he'll throw it to Ayuk. He's not afraid.
Oh yeah, no, he knows Ayuk, he knows Ayuk's a dog and he's going to get it no matter what. Yeah, same thing with George and Debo. Truthfully, honestly, there's no reason why not to any of them. To answer Brian's question of is short passes a real problem? I don't think it's a real problem, but I definitely know that I would like him to see a lot more reps regarding a float. Like when you got a DN that's putting quick pressure, a safety that decides to rush. And cut off a lane, and you've got to like loft it over them from like in the backfield, like maybe 5 yards or less to a split back that does a quick out. Yeah, I'd love for him to work that more, to have those light feather type passes. I think that I would question that as much as anyone, but I don't think that there's really an issue.
Yeah,
but definitely needs more reps.
Yep. Let's talk more about NDSU. We talked about Trey Lance, and obviously another quarterback from NDSU is Carson Wentz. But what are your expectations for Carson Wentz before we jump into the NDSU stuff? Because I forgot to mention this one. But what overall are your expectations for Carson Wentz? Because obviously 2017, the Eagles were okay. They were rebuilding. Then the Eagles go on the Super Bowl run. I don't know if I remember.
That was 2017. The Super Bowl run was 2017. Okay, it was 2017/18 was the Super Bowl.
2017/18 Super Bowl run, right? And Carson Wentz, if he did not get injured, he would have won MVP because he was playing at an MVP caliber level that whole entire season.
Yep.
Obviously, Nick Foles won Super Bowl MVP, but if Carson Wentz didn't do what he did that year, the Eagles would not have probably made it to the playoffs, and they probably wouldn't even made it to the Super Bowl if Carson Wentz didn't play at a high level that he did that season. So as much as Nick Foles gets credit, and I'm not going to say Nick Foles doesn't deserve credit because he played really well in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I don't think Nick Foles would have been able to, from week 1 to week 17, won enough games as the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles to have made it to the playoffs.
Okay, so
But
so you know how Emmanuel Acho has consistently been, like dogging Trey and nicknamed him one play Trey, right? So in the NFL, for those that really know quarterbacks, we call Nick Foles three game Foles, because Nick Foles, after 3 games, the defense figures him out and he's dead in the water. And it happened. I don't know if people, like a lot of people know this, but the Philadelphia Eagles had Nick Foles before. He had a phenomenal season where he threw like 29 or 30 touchdowns or something like that. And then the next year, like 3 games in, they knew the tendencies and he got destroyed. They cut him the following year. And then he went on a journeyman path to a number of different teams and ended up in Philadelphia again, backing up Wentz, who went 11-2. Like you said, he was on an MVP run. He currently had 33 touchdowns at the time when he was the leading MVP vote getter. And that was at game 13. And after 16 games, the highest passing touchdown total was Russell Wilson with 34. So 1 more touchdown in 3 games. And at that time, he was at a clip of minimum passing for 3 touchdowns a game. So yes, he was phenomenal. He got hurt. He has some issues, had some issues. He plays Superman. He doesn't know how to save his body as well. He doesn't know how to slide overly well. He has a lot of the same afflictions that Trey does, but Trey is a better quarterback than Carson. However, it's like the problem is, again, a lot of this has to do with algorithms and the national media as far as the overall belief about Carson Wentz. If Carson Wentz would have thrown for 2 touchdowns and thrown 1 pick in that game and they ended up beating Jacksonville, there would be no issue whatsoever for Carson Wentz. So as far as overall Carson, he, like, tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure he threw either 32 or 33 touchdowns last year with like only 7 interceptions. It was his best season statistically from that ratio.
I don't know if it was 33. I feel like it was 27, somewhere around that number, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm looking it up right now.
Yep, do that for me. Okay, and so Carson Wentz was having a phenomenal season except for the last like 2 minutes of the season or the last quarter of the season.
I was right. 27 touchdowns.
27? Nice. Okay. So what was the interception? 27 and what?
7.
Yeah, okay. So they're
27-7.
7. Yeah. Still a phenomenal season, right? You're right. I did overshoot him and I shouldn't have done that. So 27-7, phenomenal season, right? There's nothing wrong with that, except for he imploded and threw 2 picks against the worst team in the NFL at the worst possible time that he could have. So that's why he got thrown out of town. So what I predict for him this year, to answer your question, I predict for him to be the same quarterback he was last year and be a top 10 QBR quarterback. I think NDSU by the end of the year will have 2 top 10 QBR quarterbacks starting in the NFL. That's what I believe. I'm not saying like he's going to be perfect. He's going to make stupid mistakes. He has a Superman complex that he can't get over, where he thinks like he needs to put everything on his shoulders and starts making some stupid, like, questioning throws and stuff. Like, he's a reincarnate of Favre, truth be told. They have the exact same type of mentality, and Favre was his favorite quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings growing up. I know that's weird to say because he was with the Packers the majority of the time, but I'm saying Carson Wentz, that was his hero. That's exactly who he plays like. He's just slightly better in accuracy.
Instantly, when you said Favre, I thought about that moment when Vikings played the Saints, playoffs.
Oh, I know.
Favre throws that interception just
right after 12 men on the field. It was one of the nights as a man I have cried on my way home from a bar with my buddies. And I am not ashamed to admit that, being as diehard of a fan and purple bleeding that I am.
Yeah, but I mean, I cried when the Niners lost the Super Bowl because that was rough. And then it was Monday, right? So I was like, okay, I have to go to school, and my school is full of Seahawks fans. So I'm like,
oh, yeah, you got it hard. I understand. You wouldn't believe some of the stuff I've done in the name of the Minnesota Vikings. Like, I used to be on air in a morning show up in North Dakota. So to come up with like unique stuff, I've had to drink a horrible concoction milkshake, and the winner, the Green Bay Packers fan that I was on air with, got to pick 3 ingredients to put into a milkshake for me, and I had to drink the whole thing. There was another time I had to shave my legs and wear a dress. Again, I will do anything for my team, just to let you know. So I'm just saying I can relate and then some to being heartbroken.
Yep, it was hard. It was really hard. I mean, you have NDSU at least because NDSU wins, championships year after year.
I was really lucky this year because I have an FBS team, which is the Georgia Bulldogs here as well. So this year I got to win both championships. It was phenomenal.
Wow,
Now when the Minnesota Vikings defeat, Trey Lance in the NFC Championship game this year and goes on to win the Super Bowl, you can all be happy for me, right?
yeah, that's nice. I mean, this year I'm a Niners fan and I'm a Lakers fan, so this year was just I mean, the Niners we made it to the NFC
Brutal.
Championship game, but this year was just not the greatest in terms of sports.
Well,
but
you should be a Golden State fan, aren't you supposed to be? Isn't that the way that the fandom works? Is it like 50-50?
My family's a Golden State fan, and I'll be honest. I haven't said this before, but I've bounced around so many teams. Like I've bounced around.
You're young. It's different when you're young, and especially in today's day and age.
So here's the thing. Yeah,
you have access to everyone.
Yeah. So here's the thing, right? For football and baseball and hockey, which I don't really follow hockey that much, but I'm loyal to Niners, Giants, Sharks. But with basketball, it's a little bit different. Where with basketball, I was a Bulls fan because of D Rose, and then D Rose got hurt, and then the Bulls were kind of rebuilding, and then they would make really dumb moves, and I mean,
somebody needs to sit you down and teach you fandom that win, lose, or draw, it doesn't matter.
Yes,
you got to.
I know that now. I know that now, right?
Yeah. Okay. No more hee-haw, no more seesaw. You are a whatever for life now.
And then I bounced around so many teams.
Okay. Good. So no more bouncing. Now you're a Niners fan for life, right?
Yeah. I'm a Niners fan for life. That never changes, right? And nor is the Giants. I've watched bad Giants years. I've seen bad. The Sharks are still bad, but I've seen other teams. I've seen it all.
Did you know Minnesota is known as the state of hockey, and we have never been to an NHL championship? So I feel you. And then our by the way, you stole our basketball team. And Texas stole our hockey team, and the year after they stole our hockey team, they won the Stanley Cup. So, again, there is no one from Minnesota that will ever feel bad for anyone of any sport. We are the number, and by we, I say that like I'm still in Minnesota, even though I'm in Georgia. But it's widely known that Minneapolis is the longest drought without a championship market with 4 major sporting teams in all of sports. Like, we haven't won a championship of basketball, football, baseball, or hockey, or any other major sport. We haven't won one in 32 years now. 31 years. 31 years. And the craziest part is, if you want to talk baseball, the Minnesota Twins have lost 17 consecutive playoff games. Like 17 straight games, meaning we haven't won a playoff game in about 2 decades.
I'll just say it's I think the Twins are probably the Lions of
Oh, absolutely. We are now, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, you can't complain too much because at least you're not the Lions. I mean, Lions fans, I've said this before. Lions fans are true warriors because
definitely.
They haven't won nothing in almost 30 years. Plus,
if you're a Vikings fan, you love the Lions. Why? Because they're always in the cellar of our division. So it's like a doormat, right? Like, imagine if there was one of the teams in your division that you beat every single. So the Rams. Yeah, that's the Rams for you guys.
Yeah.
For any Rams fans listening out there, there you go. But the funny thing is I say that and I don't really mean it because the Vikings tend to lose to the teams that they should win and then beat some teams that they shouldn't. And every year we split with the Lions. It's like the last 3 years, the only wins that the Lions get, I swear, against the Minnesota Vikings. So,
yeah, I remember. And Camp Report says Lions might be a sleeper team this year. I love.
The Lions think that every year. I'd be more than happy to wager anybody who legitimately thought that.
Okay, I mean, I don't know how well the Lions will do because their roster isn't that great, but I'll say this. I love Dan Campbell. I'm a huge fan of Dan Campbell because Dan Campbell is such an emotional coach, and you could tell he has the respect of his locker room. He has the respect of his team, and you could tell his players just love playing for him.
Definitely.
That analogy that players can run through a brick wall for you. That's Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell has that for his whole team.
I
Whole
really
team will
hope
run
that he
through a
can
brick
turn
wall.
it around. I
Yep.
mean, I hope to an extent that he can turn it around. I still want them to get their butts kicked on the frequent. They're in my division. It's like me saying, you know what? The Arizona Cardinals are really good
Yep.
right now. They were the first 8-0 team last season. Go Cards. I can imagine how all the 49er faithful out there are feeling right now. They'd probably like to come through and strangle me through the camera. So I get it. That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
Okay.
And this
What was
guy's
your next subject? Did you want to talk about something else? You wanted to talk about another NDSU
let's
player?
wrap this up. Let's wrap this up because we got a couple more topics, and I know we've already gone an hour, and you're on the East Coast.
It's all good.
But let's talk about NDSU a little bit.
Yeah.
Who are some players to look out from NDSU that are coming out in next year's draft, or just players that are superstars in the NDSU
Yeah.
world, or really good players in the NDSU that a lot of the national media or just Niners fans either don't know about and that should be looking out for?
Okay, so there's three I would probably definitely want to talk about, and I'll make this as brief as possible because for the most part nobody cares, and I get it. It's the difference between NFL and college football fans, but even a subdivision that's a little bit further and a little too far down into the rabbit hole. But okay, so last year we won the title, right? Cam Miller was our quarterback. Here's the ironic thing is there's a very good chance Cam Miller will not be our starting quarterback, even though he could be. He's going to get benched likely for a different dude. Now, put that into context. The national champion who led us to the national championship, this dude did, and he's probably going to get benched for this next guy. He's supposed to be the next big thing, and that's Cole Payton is his name. And then you're going to laugh at this. The kid who just signed with NDSU and is coming in for his red shirt this fall, I can't remember it. Oh, now I remember. His name is Trey Drake. I'm not joking. It's like as cartoon quarterback sounding as it possibly could be, and it's another Trey. Trey Drake is his name. He is a dual threat, but not as much in the legs, but he has an amazing cannon. So I'm excited to see that guy. Cole Payton is our first southpaw. He's a left-hander, and he is gritty and gifted. I don't know a hell of a lot more about that right now. I'm hoping this fall that we get to see some amazing stuff. I will make it a point down the road to, once I come back, because I'm going to take off of Twitter during the season, then I'll come back onto this account once Trey and your team is done. But I've got my own to root for, right? So at the end of the season, I'll come back and tell you how NDSU did. I'll do a recap of if they won the championship or not, who the standouts are. The other two standouts, I would say maybe three. I definitely want to give a shout out to Phoenix Sproles. That was Trey's number 2. He's coming into his 5th and final. Oh, look at that. There it is. Yes. Coming into his 5th and final season. P. Drippy, we call him, or he calls himself. He was Trey's best friend, roommate. He's a phenomenal wideout. He's short. He's Darren Sproles' cousin, I think. Not as electric, but he is very gritty and he really doesn't miss the ball. Where people were talking about Christian Watson with hand issues of him not having 8 drops or something like that. Phoenix doesn't really drop the ball. He has phenomenal hands. Second, I would definitely say is Trey's brother, Bryce Lance, who I think is 6'3", maybe 6'4", and meeting his brother's height as well. I honestly believe that Carlton had a plan in place for his 2 sons and not just the one. Be on the lookout for that, 49er faithful. Be very mindful of what's going on in Fargo this year with Bryce Lance. I'm going to be paying close attention. I'll give you tabs afterwards, but I recommend checking out and checking in occasionally with his brother Bryce to see how he's coming along. Third would be a national they come out with this, I think it's top 100 freak players in football. They just came out with it not that long ago, and a couple days ago, and Hunter Libke, our fullback, is one of the top 100 freaks in football. He's the one that you definitely want to look for. He's juice. He's juice 2.0. Honest, if I were to give you a reference of who he is, that's who he is. And he loves bulldozing people. He loves pancaking on blocks. But this kid ran for 3 touchdowns in the first half of the national championship, and then they put him on ice for the rest of the game. but he's the guy that's searching out contact. He loves to go after DBs and flatten them. So that's who I would say from NDSU to be on the lookout for.
Yep. Thank you for that insight. Obviously, we talked about it pre-draft about some of the players outside of Christian Watson that you were looking out for. And you mentioned an offensive lineman. I think he got drafted by the Bengals. I can't remember his name.
Cordell Volson, and he is currently in, like, this is the crazy part, right? So they were like, oh, we've already got our left guard for the year. And then all of a sudden this Cordell Volson kid starts playing. And the next thing you know, he's neck and neck with that starter. I'll promise you, this is one of my predictions that will come to fruition. He'll be one of the starting guards for Burrows this year, which, like, think about that we're going to have one of the top guards. I mean, you got to be a top guard if you're on the team that was synonymous with letting your quarterback be nailed and sacked 9 times in a single game, right? Like, they know how terrible their offensive line was. So they made that a focal point of the draft, and they're going to end up with an NDSU lineman who is going to be a starter, and he will be a long-term fundamental, like, foundational player for them. Also, NDSU just had a re-sign for the Denver Broncos. One of the wide receivers for Wilson is going to be an NDSU wideout. The number 1 for Aaron Rodgers this year is going to be an NDSU wideout. One of the top linemen for Aaron Rodgers is an NDSU lineman. Like, we're all over the place. It's just that you don't see us a lot in, like, skill position. So now all of a sudden you're going to start to hear more and more about NDSU because we've got multiple wide receivers and multiple quarterbacks in the NFL. So,
What position does Trey Lance's brother play? I think he plays receiver.
He's a wideout. They wanted Trey to either be a wideout or a safety or some form of DB when they were recruiting him. That's why they gave him what's called the athlete designation on his recruitment form, and that's what killed him. That's why he fell through the cracks of the FBS into the FCS, because of one recruiter writing athlete on the check form. And that's why he didn't end up probably being the starting quarterback for the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And thank goodness that was the case, because we love sweeping in and taking those Minnesota players that all of Minneapolis professional or top end collegiate football teams seem to overlook. So we're more than happy to pick them up.
Yeah, but let's talk about the receipts. Now, you have this thing on Twitter, call the receipts, and I feel like you post one every single day. I think you do post one every single day.
I was posting like 5 or 6 for a while every day, yeah.
Yeah, of people that have been showing hate to Trey Lance.
Yes.
Without really any context necessarily, because he hasn't played that much. He's only played 2 games, right. Hasn't played necessarily that much in college because he's only had 1 full season in college. So without a lot of context, there's been a lot of Trey hate, and you have this thing called the receipts. Yes. So I would like if you would further elaborate on that.
Absolutely, and I'll try and make this fast too. I'm trying to bring this up while I'm on the line here with you, but I'm going to bring my Twitter feed up over here. But basically what happened is one night me and a buddy from Fargo were talking about how, like, NDSU and specifically, like, Trey was walking into a scenario like Colin Kaepernick with, like, Trey supports Black Lives Matter as well. And we just were like, well, like, there's going to be a lot of illegitimate, like, hate out there. And I'm not afraid to say it. There's a lot of racist hate out there on Trey. So I said, well, what if we, like, just, like, capture the people who illegitimately show him hate and then, like, show it to everyone? And my buddy Chris was like, well, how are we going to do that? And I said, well, like, let's create an account. And then we started searching out people that were streaming 49ers stuff, which the crazy part is that your fandom has more, I feel, like, online multimedia interaction with your team than any other I've ever seen. So I logged on, and Chris and I one night went on Jesse's podcast or stream, and we just started talking about Christian Watson and Trey Lance and stuff. And he was like, well, like, how do you know all this stuff? So I started talking to him about it. And I said, you know, there's a lot of illegit hate out there on Trey. So we came up with this list, and we just created a Twitter list where we said, okay, if you show hate towards Trey and that's all you put out there. And then after doing this for probably about 6 months period of time where we were doing, like, a lot of social media interaction and running some hashtags. I come from a background in media marketing and advertising. I've been in it for 25 years. So I know how social media works and how to get things to trend and whatnot. It's called SEO, which is search engine optimization. Basically, it's like, let's say that you sell like gadgets or widgets or whatever online, right? And you want to be number one at it. So you'll create a bunch of fake websites. You'll create a network of websites and you'll put out all this information on how your widgets and whatever are the most amazing. Now, nobody has to really stumble upon this. Nobody has to go to it. You don't have to have visitors there. It just has to exist to be included in the all-encompassing algorithm that is the internet. So lo and behold, this character named Daniel Kelly, or as we call him, Danny Two Lips, I'm sure at some point in time he's listening or watching or whatever, decided that he was just going to continually hate on Trey with no fundamental understanding of who he was as a player. Like he said that he put out like some sports analyst write-up as far as looking at him and how he was, and like he's a former Jet Scout, and it turns out that he actually is not. And it also turns out that he doesn't know anything about Trey. So I was calling him out repeatedly and added him to the receipts list. And then it turns out that he had a network, a farm of all negative Trey Lance information across the internet. And then he was continually copying and pasting all negative, analyst breakdowns of his. And it inevitably led to Trey Lance and negative trending. And that's how I believe quite a bit of the national narrative negativity regarding Lance and his development. It didn't stem from there, but it definitely didn't help it. So it was, in my opinion, our job to kind of proactively let everyone in 49er Nation know that this person is a bad faith actor and they need to stay away from him because he's not putting out any realistic or objective content regarding Trey Lance or the San Francisco 49ers. He's just repeatedly peddling hate and divisiveness. And the reason why he's doing that is for interaction. He's getting people that are getting mad. And so therefore they're commenting and they're subscribing and they're, continually interacting. And then he creates like 15, 20 illegitimate other handle Twitter accounts as well. And there are a couple of them out there that are doing that. I know that there are at least 20 negative Trey handles on Twitter that are just out there to perpetuate negative information. And it's not like, oh, I just hate the kid. It's to try and be divisive and create, interactions so that they make money off of this. The problem with that is that it's also subscribing to a racial narrative. And that's why we have a big problem with that because, I'm from the far north where we're not intermingled with different races. And to live out in the world and travel and be from different places and realize that there's nothing that separates us when it comes to race other than some weird early, upbringing or whatever, it's baloney. So we call it out every opportunity that we can get, and we created the receipts to do it.
Yep. I mean, it's always fun to see what people have to say about Trey. So I always look at your receipts. I always check up on those every couple of days.
We've got a couple hundred more to do, and we're going to do most of them at the end of the season because if somebody said Trey Lance is a bust, I mean, yeah, we put him on the list, but who's to say he might be a bust? That might be an objective opinion. But we're definitely going to come back if he has a great season and let him know they were wrong. So,
yep. Well, that's basically all of the topics that we have today. Before we get out of here, because I know it's getting late and we've already done almost an hour and 25-minute stream.
Yeah.
But can we get a record prediction and can we get a Trey stat line prediction before we get out of here? How many touchdowns? How many interceptions? Record prediction.
Yep, I've been holding out on this. I did it with Jesse the other night because I promised him when we first came on that I would do the reveal with him. And he and I actually have very similar numbers. So my overall stat projections, it's probably going to be disappointing on behalf of the passing. I only have him down for 3,800 passing yards just because I think a lot of people don't realize, and I think that they held back a lot on this. You're going to be a ground and pound team this year. You're going to have the ability to air it out and for Trey to get deadly at any point in time, but your run game's what's going to be amazing. That's what Trey is there for, is to produce perfect efficiency in your run game. I want him to do what he is really good at, and that is running like an 8-minute long drive. So my prediction is 36 touchdowns and 9 turnovers. And 36, I mean, you can break that however you want. I put it at 28 passing and then 8 rushing, and then 9 total turnovers. You can break that however out you want as well. But 36 and 9 with 3,800 yards passing is my prediction. So.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know about the record because there's a lot. Like I said this last show,
Yep.
there's a lot
9
of
and 8 is what I've been saying.
9, 8, 10 and 7, maybe 11 and 6. There's a lot of 50-50 games. There's a lot
Yes.
of there where there's
Yep.
toss-ups, or like the Broncos game.
He has you got a rough schedule coming up this season. You really do.
We do.
I do have a prediction that he's going to outduel the GOAT towards the end of the season. So feel free to call me out on that one when it comes to fruition, or when it doesn't.
Yep. Well, I appreciate you for giving me your valuable time, Chad. It was a pleasure to have you on. I'll definitely have you on again. I'll definitely have you on again, maybe mid-season or maybe at the end of the season. Whether
I'll be here.
If you were right, if you were right about the stat line record. I mean, it'll be interesting.
I 100% will do it.
Yep, it'll be interesting to see what happens this season. But I appreciate you for joining me. Always a pleasure sitting and talking Trey Lance with you, and you have so much knowledge about football and NDSU and Trey Lance. It's always a pleasure.
It's awesome talking to you too, Amin.
Yep. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please go do so. It would be greatly appreciated. We have 13 people in here. We've had an amazing chat. Appreciate Bryant. I appreciate Bryant.
Subscribe to Amin.
Thank you, Bryant. No Border Sports, Mariah, always faithful, Maruna, Barry, a baller. We had an amazing chat today. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. It's always great when we have a live chat, so appreciate everybody for tuning in.
Thank you, everybody.
Go Niners. Obviously, Minnesota practices start this week.
Go Vikes.
No. Go Niners. Niner faithful. Bang, bang, Niner gang. That's what we say in the Bay. Bang, bang, Niner gang. But thank you for joining me, Chad. Go Niners as always. Next preseason game is Sunday, so looking forward to that. Go Niners, and we'll see you guys next time.